So Benoit is being very generous by saying not so long ago. It was actually 30 years ago I was in these seats and graduated from public policy of Carleton. Before I introduce our honorary degree recipient, I must say this is my first week as your chancellor, and I love that seat. Because I get, okay, it's not very comfortable, but I get to see these shining faces in great detail. I see the energy, enthusiasm, a little nervousness. Then I look over and I see the wonderful parents. They look so proud. They look grateful for having you as their family. So the best part of being a chancellor is sitting in that seat, because I get to see you all. What an honor is that. So this morning, sorry, I forgot the greetings. Chair of the board, Mr. Vice Chancellor, graduates, and honored guests. It is my pleasure and privilege to present our honorary doctoral recipient, Right Honourable Paul Martin. Mr. Martin's name and accomplishments are no doubt very familiar to many people, and many people in this city and across all our country and across the world. He was the Prime Minister of Canada from 2003 until 2006, and prior to that, from 1993 to 2002, he served as our country's Minister of Finance. In that latter role, Mr. Martin erased Canada's deficit and subsequently recorded 5 consecutive budget surpluses while paying down the national debt and setting Canada's debt-to-GDP ratio on a steady downward track. He introduced the largest increases in the federal government's support for education, research and development, and in conjunction with his provincial counterparts, he restored the Canada Pension Plan. In 1999, as a Canadian initiative, he founded and was the inaugural chair of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors. This organization, years later, was the critical group that steered the world through 2008 economic crisis. As Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Paul Martin set in place a plan to improve healthcare and reduce wait times, and he signed agreements with the provinces and territories to establish the first national early learning and childcare program. Under his leadership, the Government of Canada reached a historic consensus, the Kelowna Accord, with Canada's provinces, territories, First Nations, Métis Nation, and Inuit leaders to eliminate funding gaps in health, education, and housing. After leaving public life, Mr. Martin advised the African Development Bank and has worked closely with the Advisory Council of the Coalition for Dialogue on Africa. He was a founding co-chair of Congo Basin Forest Fund and a commissioner for Global Ocean Commission. In 2009, he joined members of his family to create the Martin Family Initiative. Its mission is to walk alongside Indigenous experts, communities, and leaders to ensure that opportunities for Indigenous children from birth through to secondary school are as good as any in the country and are culturally appropriate. In 2012, Mr. Martin was appointed a companion to the Order of Canada, recognizing a lifetime of outstanding achievement. Before entering politics, Mr. Martin had a long career in the private sector. He graduated from St. Michael's College and is a graduate of University of Toronto, Faculty of Law. He was called to the Ontario Bar in 1966. Throughout his exceptional career, and throughout his service to our country, Mr. Martin has relied on the advice and support of his wife, Sheila Ann Cowan, and they have 3 sons and 5 grandchildren. Dear Mr. Martin, I had the great honor of working for you as one of your deputy ministers in the Government of Canada. I benefited from your energy, natural curiosity, commitment to serving Canadians. Thank you, sir. And I thank my lucky stars that I ended up being the Chancellor, so I get to do this. So it's a great honor for me to recognize your leadership of our country and confer the degree of Doctor of Laws, honoris causa, upon you.
Hi. Well, to begin with, thank you, Madam Chancellor. And thank you, Mr. President and Vice Chancellor, Chair of the Board of Governors, members of the faculty. Allow me as well, in fact, most importantly, to thank you, the graduates, as well as your parents, your friends who are here in such great numbers, for allowing me to share this day with you. I know what you're thinking. You're saying you had to work for 4 years, and what the heck's this guy doing here? Well, anyway. But let me just simply say to you that a degree from Carleton, one of Canada's great universities, is an achievement of which you can be very proud. C'est un grand honneur pour moi de partager ce moment avec vous. I also, if you'll allow me to deviate from the program for a bit, I would like to congratulate your new Chancellor on her appointment. Throughout my years in government, I worked very closely with Yaprak Baltachilou. Her contribution to the many crucial debates that have gripped Canada was invaluable. And what I'd say is that to those of you who may be contemplating a career in the public service, and I hope that some of you are, there cannot be a better example to follow than your new Chancellor. Quite simply, she wrote the book. Now, in fact, you should clap. She's a wonderful person. She's become a great friend. I want to tell you the truth. My whole time in government, I was afraid of her. Now, I've been asked to speak to you, and that's a compliment. Heading the Treasury Board, I think with those of you who understand government, heading the Treasury Board is really where all the action rides. And I'm telling you, she's laughing. When I would appear and ask her for something, she didn't laugh. I've been asked to speak to you about some of the challenges that await you in the years ahead. I've also been asked to be brief, and I shall be, because what is important today is your graduation degree. If I didn't know that, I got it, but when we came in just now, as we walked by, I saw a friend, and I went over, and I just nodded to him. He said hello, and his only remarks was, for God's sake, these kids have worked hard. Don't speak too long. So, I won't. But what I would like to do is to focus on two issues that I believe will color the world that lies before you. The first is one of the most important moral and economic issues that we face as a country. one that will define us in the years to come. It is the future of the Indigenous people of this land. The reason that too many in this country give for not facing up to the tragic legacy of colonialism is the financial cost of doing so. Well, I was the finance minister, and I don't buy that at all. We are an aging population. Take a look at me. You're not supposed to laugh. But the fact is, I would. The fact is that the First Nations, the Métis, and the Inuit are the youngest and the fastest growing segment of our society. Their success is integral to our strength as a country. And I want to congratulate Carleton, because as I understand it, it was 2 to 3 years ago that you opened your program on Indigenous matters. And that shows you just how important this university is as it begins to address what I believe is the single biggest moral and economic issue that we face. First Nations, the Métis and Inuit do not ask for charity. They ask for the tools that they require if they're going to succeed, as did each and every one of you, for they are the very tools that you have gained here at Carleton. My first message is therefore quite straightforward, that it is up to all of us in this room and each and every one of you to ensure that our governments at all levels, federal, municipal, provincial, our governments provide the tools to the Indigenous peoples of this land for the country we build together. And that's really, I think, the important issue of the course, the program that you have developed. And it really is important, the message that was brought to you by the elder this morning. And it also leads me to my second thought. As you know so well, the greatest problem the world faces is global warming. That we have watched its devastation spread without reply in the last 50 years stems from the belief that we are all above nature. Well, we aren't. As the Indigenous peoples of this world, not just Canada, not just North America or even Latin America, have told us from the very beginning, we are part of nature. We are not above nature, and we cannot escape the consequences of that reality. We witness it in every firestorm, every flood, and every drought we read of with such frequency. We see it now in the 1 million species facing extinction, as confirmed by the recent United Nations study on biodiversity. We appear to believe that these are natural events of normal variety. Well, they aren't. Now, you're probably thinking, why is he telling us all this? We already know it. Global warming is his generation's fault, not ours. And you're right. And that's why I'm asking your generation not to make the same mistake that mine did. In 1992, I was an observer at the Rio de Janeiro Earth Conference, which was one of the first great global summits on the environment. There I heard the promises that were made, few of which were kept. And I witnessed how easy it was for governments to return home, walking away from all that they had pledged to do once the headlines had passed, and thus setting the bleak precedent for so many of the environmental conferences that followed. Indeed, leaving us now with our biggest hope, the Paris Agreement of 2015, hanging in the balance. And what I am asking you today, after all that you have gone through to be here, to get your degrees, to use the knowledge that you have picked up here, to use the inspiration that you obviously is written on your faces, what I'm asking you to do is to be the generation that breaks the cycle. Now again, there are those who will tell you that we cannot afford to act. However, the truth is, what we can't afford to do is to remain idle, ignoring the mounting costs of climate change. And in fact, the truth is there are enormous gains if we act. Of According to the 2018 report on the Global Commission on the Economy and Climate, and I quote, "The next 10 to 15 years are a unique use it or lose it moment in economic history." The study goes on to project that transitioning to a low-carbon, sustainable path could deliver a positive economic gain of over $26 trillion in the next decade compared to business as usual. In short, there is only one answer to global warming. We cannot afford to simply paint the old economy green. We need to transition to a new economy, one that has the environment written into it. This is the challenge that you, each and every one of you, must embrace. Watching the world go by is no longer an option. The challenge ahead is great, and the question that you must ask each other is, are we up for it? Are we up to it? Can we make this happen? In the generations that came before you, the generations of your parents, the generations of their parents, the generations of the people who were sitting behind you, careers in life were defined by the struggles of their time. World wars, massive depressions, tensions of East and West. That's the way it was. And they all rose to that challenge. Well, your generation will be defined by global warming. This is the battle that lies ahead. This is your challenge, and I know you're up for it, and I know this because you are here today, graduating from this great university. And with that message, I will declare that my time is up, and that I will sit down. Party time is not that far away. Thank you. Et bonne chance.